Thank you. So if you had to guess, what do you think happened to hate crime rates in London after the Brexit referendum? Do you think they went up, stayed the same, or went down? Up? Yeah, it did. Oh, Anik, how do I make this? There we go. Okay. Right. They didn't just go up. They went up by 29%. In London, across every single hate crime group that the Metropolitan Police tracks, hate crime went up. And in our most recent data, February of 2018, year on year, we're still finding hate crime going up by 4.35%. Obviously, nowhere near as dramatic as what happened after the Brexit referendum, but still going up. And for me, I feel like these are symptoms of the same thing. Hate crime, the Brexit referendum. I just had this feeling that something was happening, and I didn't quite know what, but I wanted to know what. So I'm me. I started looking at the data, and I looked at everything. I looked at everything from a global trust study that goes every year, which had trust completely implode in 2017, to publicly available surveys, to privately available surveys that my clients have allowed me to share with permission, small bits, to literal sets of psychological data on certain populations, and even academic articles. And really what this all comes down to, I think we're living in an age of anger. Just think about it. Think about everything that's been happening in the world. Think about everything that's been happening in the UK. Something's off, right? So my name is Emily Hunt, and by day I am the managing director of 36NS. When people ask me what I do, I usually say I'm a data storyteller. And what that means to me is my job is to sift through the numbers, to figure out how to uncover that hidden story, and then be inspired on what to do next. Susan mentioned that I started in politics. My very first campaign that I worked on back in the day, right out of grad school, it was such a disaster. The political consultant ran off with all of the money. And the worst part was this guy had been the childhood best friend of my candidate. So I had no money, no resources, a few dispirited volunteers, and a completely depressed candidate, like completely. But what I did have was data. We'd done a survey, a political survey across our entire constituency, and we had data on a block by block level. And I sat there inside the numbers trying to figure everything out. And so I built a model, and that model told us where to prioritize, where to put our volunteers, where to put our resources, and how to actually get out the vote. And you know what? I was hooked, like properly hooked. Here I am, straight out of school, and I'm able to say, this is what I think we should do. I'm able to say 500 pages of data right here, say this is what we should do, absolutely need to do, and I am right. And it was awesome. Since then, I've worked for a prime minister, an armed rebellion on the right side, a royal family. None of these happened in this country. Just to be clear, certainly not that armed rebellion. And as Susan mentioned, I've worked on the corporate side for everybody from Apple to Unilever. And what I do is I look at the information. I started off doing survey research and focus groups and generating all of my own data. And that was fun, but actually, I like looking at the data that people already have, what's already out there. What can we look at differently? Where can we find the story? I'm that one who's endlessly curious, right? And yeah, there was that time I made VLOOKUP tables for fun, basically, in Excel, because I'm sorry. But for me, it's about finding a solution to a problem. I'm who you come to if you've got a bunch of numbers and you need to know what they actually mean, not just what they say. So what does any of this have to do with anger? Well, like I said, I was looking at all these things happening in the world and I wanted to understand. And so I started looking and I started sifting. And I went back to the beginning. I went back to Brexit. Because for me, the Brexit referendum is an absolute prime example of this age of anger that we're living in. On the morning after the Brexit referendum, my daughter cried. cried, properly, bitterly cried. I mean, I was upset too, but she was crying. Turns out there was a little bit of confusion. She just learned about continents in school, and she thought that they were going to attach a giant towboat to this island and tow it out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean because we were leaving Europe. And she was crying because she loves Paris. And she thought that the pulling was going to break the channel and that we weren't going to be able to take the train to Paris anymore. You just got to love it. But for me, you know, I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut because I felt like if there'd been a line item on that ballot that said, deport Emily, even though she's a citizen now, that I would have been on the first plane home because people were angry. And I could feel it. I could feel it in my bones, and I could feel it in the data as soon as I got my hands on it. So people are angry. Brexit's a great example. So is the most recent general election. So is about 1,000 other things you can think of right now that are happening in your day-to-day lives. But here's the thing. Voters aren't just voters, right? They're people. They go around breathing oxygen, having jobs, having relationships, buying things, right? So an angry voter isn't just a voter. This isn't just about the political landscape. If we're dealing with a world where voters are angry, people are angry, and that changes the context of how we communicate with them. And that's a lot of what I've been talking to clients about lately, right? We don't communicate in vacuums. When I talk to a business about how they need to communicate, and actually, when I start thinking about how we as people need to communicate, we need to recognize that this is what we're living in the midst of. Data, right? I can't help it. I love it. Excuse the funny squiggles. I'm colorblind, and it's the only way I can tell the differences in what's going on. So let me explain this to you. I did a survey. It was a nationally representative 2,000 person survey, totally robust and fantastic. And basically what this survey told me is that, well, the technical term is people in the UK are pissed off, like really pissed off. The majority of people feel negatively about politics at 72%, government at 64%, the economy at 51%, and the state of the environment at 50%. And I swear that one would be higher after the last couple of weeks of snow. But it's not just that they're angry, right? What are they angry about? So I had some friends look into this for me, the lovely people at Listen and Learn Research. They read, oh God, pretty much everything on the internet between July and September of last year, coded up everything, did some random sampling, and this is what they got to. When people talk about being angry on the internet now in the UK, it's because they're feeling betrayal. It's because they feel like they've lost personal agency. There's a sense of righteous indignation. They feel violated. They're taking offense. Or there's a sense of personal injustice. And you can feel that, right? You can feel how those things could lead to anger. You can feel how it's this lack of agency, lack of control that's making things difficult. Unfortunately, it gets a bit worse because I wanted to understand the context, right? I'd started doing all this research into anger, trying to understand what was going on, trying to help people get it. Unfortunately, I sat inside the academic literature, and I can tell you that angry people are 28% more likely to basically become intolerant. They can be pushed along that line quite easily, and that's when we start talking about Cambridge Analytica and the Russian trolls. And unfortunately, in other studies, you can also prove a link between intolerance and growing violence. So when we talk about the rise of hate crime in London after Brexit, it starts to feel intuitive, right? We start to understand that lack of agency, that lack of control, and it leads on this path from anger to violence. Oops, wrong direction. In the US, we probably have the best example of this from the alt-right. And I was actually able to crunch psychological data from the alt-right to figure out that, yeah, they're more angry than other people. They're also 2.5 times more likely to be jerks than other people. They troll, they harass, they dox, they do horrible things online and off. And while we don't have any similar data for the BNP or Britain First people here, we can again kind of draw those links between what's going on one side and the other. And really, I think we can draw links not just from the alt-right to the BNP and Britain First, but actually to populist movements on both the extreme right and the extreme left. So, right before the Brexit referendum, I got into a fairly heated conversation with Alistair Campbell. And I told him that if it rained on Brexit referendum day that we were going to be leaving the EU. Does everybody remember when the storm started? Yeah. Lightning, Waterloo got shut down. Are we leaving the EU? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are. But this is what it comes back to, right? Again and again and again. It's not just about politics. We live in a political environment. We live in a political world. It impacts everything. So when we need to communicate, when we need to have our businesses out there, I'm from a PR background, PR, advertising, everything. It all has to do with the context that we're living in and the fact that we're not living in a vacuum. So if this was thought-provoking for you in any way, pop over to www.36ns.xyz, and you can book in a call with me so that I can talk with you about how this can apply to your business. And it's about understanding your business and your story, the story that you can tell in the context of the current environment. So thank you very much.
Love that talk, Emily. So I'm a girl geek, as Eve mentioned, and Emily's a different type of girl geek. And I really, really love that, because I think it's, having those interesting facts about you or knowing your stories and be able to have actually the fact-based figures and numbers behind it. Really cool skill to have. So we don't judge this talk for this one, so give another hand for Emily.
Thank you.